What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. We like magic, and today I got a list for you. Here are the top 20 cards from Unstable that I wish I could play in Constructed. Kind of a weird list, I know, but Unstable is kind of a weird set, so it calls for a weird list. And honestly, I think this is like one of the most relevant ways you can approach making a list for Unstable, if you're going to do it, because like a lot of casual play groups will allow like cards from unsets to be played, so long as they're just like straight magic cards that aren't super gimmicky or broken or anything. Some casual play groups will allow you to play them, and then some people even play uncards in their cubes. This might be a really relevant list for you when it comes to just identifying what are the best pure magic cards in this set to include in your cube. So hope you enjoy it. Let's go for it. Now, before we get into the actual top 20 here, I've got a couple of honorable mentions like I usually do. And the whole reason that I have honorable mentions this time is because I didn't want to include like super gimmicky cards or anything on the actual list. And there are a ton of gimmicky cards, like an eye-rolling amount of gimmicky cards in Unstable. But there are a couple of cards that revolve around weird gimmicks that I actually think would function pretty well as straight magic cards in a constructed set. So let me go ahead and show those to you. The first of which is Go to Jail. Usually, even when they're printed in like real sets, you know, cards that make you roll dice and flip coins aren't very good because you can't rely on the result. You know, it's not consistent, it's not reliable. So usually these cards are bad. But if Go to Jail was printed in a black bordered set, this would be a really nice card. You know, it's sort of like a Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, just 1 mana white removal. That's pretty hot, and the probability that they'll roll doubles is about 1 in 6. So they could always get lucky and roll doubles like immediately, but chances are their guy's going to stay in jail for 2 or 3 turns, and if you're in a really fast aggro deck and you're playing this card, it's incredibly efficient removal that can cover at least a couple of turns for you for an extremely low cost. So I actually really like this. If it were printed in a real set, I'd be super happy about it. My other honorable mention is Angelic Rocket, and disregard the way it's written. Just look at the text on the card. When this enters the battlefield, kill a thing. So we get Angel of Despair in Standard again, and any deck could play it, which might suck a little bit if every deck had access to it. But I don't think every deck would play it, obviously. It costs 8 mana. But like Godfarer's Gift would love a piece like this in Standard. So I wouldn't be averse to it. I'd definitely like to see something like that. But the fact that this exists in an unset is probably proof that we won't see anything like this in Standard in a good time. But now we're actually into the list. Here's the top 20 unstable cards I want to play in Constructed, and I'll go from 20 to 16 relatively quick here because I don't have too much to say about 20 through 16. I just think that they're cool cards. So with that in mind, number 20 is the Thieving Magpie look-alike thing, SpyEye right here. It is exactly Thieving Magpie. In fact, except that you draw the cards from your opponent's deck, which is beyond hilarious. Point is, it's a weird Thieving Magpie, and it's like one of my favorite cards, weirdly, of all time. I've had a lot of good times with Thieving Magpie way back in the long ago, so I just like that they call back to Magpie, and I really think this is a really neat way to twist it. My number 19 is 5-Finger Discount. This is essentially 6 mana blue removal that allows you to play the creature once you have the mana to do that. It's actually really decent, you know. I don't think this would see much standard play if it was a real card or anything, but I do think, again, blue removal that's decent. That's fine. You know, hide it in your hand for a couple of turns. It's not doing damage to you. That's fine. When you actually do have the mana to play it, whatever. It's fine. So I think that for 6 mana, that's an awful lot, but it is really neat. And this doesn't have to be an uncard. Usually thief cards are kind of weird, you know, so I wouldn't put this past being in a real set. My number 18 is the Earl of Squirrel right here. Yes, I really like Squirrel Link. I think that's cool. You could just sub out like any creature type link for Squirrel if you wanted to. And that actually seems like a really neat ability, you know. He's 4 power when he comes in, and he can represent another 4 power, even if he just like blocks and dies or something. So you get at least 8 power a lot of the time, unless he's removed with just like spot removal, point removal, whatever. Then he can be worth easily 8 power or a lot more sometimes. So that seems really good, but 6 mana is a pretty high rate for this, so that kind of does balance it a good bit. 6 mana is an awful lot, but when it can represent this much power, the ceiling on it is so high, and it gives your other like non-squirrel tokens a boost too. You could easily build around that. So I think 6 mana is a pretty decent balance for this effect, but it is a really neat effect. Again, that could be any creature type other than squirrel, and it might actually work on a real creature in a constructed set. So I really like the idea behind this mechanic. My number 17 is Clocknapper. I think this is now my second favorite blue 5 mana 2/2. It's like Mole Drifter and then this. And honestly, 5 mana for a 2/2, and it's really blue intensive, is not where you want to be. So I don't think it's hard to argue this card isn't super broken, because mostly you're just going to get like a fog out of it. which can be really good, don't get me wrong, but you still paid 5 mana for a 2/2, so unless you need them to skip a step in order for you to not die, I don't think this card is really worth it in Constructed Magic. But I really, really like that text box. I want a card like this to exist in real life. And number 16 is Infinite Elemental, and the only thing I really have to say about this is Fling, obviously. I mean, that's what everyone's been saying, but, you know, Fling, I'll add my voice to the choir there, Fling. But aside from that, it's actually pretty good. I mean, if it were in Standard, hilarious, you know, like, it's pretty easy to remove, and you can just block it with chumps and stuff. Like, it wouldn't be that broken, right? It probably would. It probably would. But especially in a format with Fling, you know, you keep your Pummeler and just play this. But number 15 is Graveyard Busybody. Again, this is a card whose text box I just adore, and that's the case with most of these cards. A lot of them are costed really weird, and they have weird power and toughness and stuff, but their text box is extremely attractive, and this is one of them, you know. I don't think that this necessarily has to be a really gimmicky card or anything that only ever shows up in unsets. I like the idea of both graveyards essentially belonging to you, and it'd be really funny in Standard, for instance, even though this costs so much mana, but it would just be a fun trick in Standard to, like, remove creatures from their graveyard to get your Scrap Heap Scrounger back. That'd be funny. You know? Liliana would get better. Even Godfarer's Gift. Yeah, think about that. You can Godfarer's Gift this into play for a discount. It's bigger than it's supposed to be, and you can get stuff out of your opponent's graveyard. That would be really, really hot. So I actually wouldn't, you know, put this past seeing actual constructed play. So just want to point this out. I don't think that getting to play out of both graveyards is that broken, but it has the potential to be, but in Standard right now, probably not. Modern, maybe a different story, but again, you really have to cheat this out, and at that point, is it worth it? But then again, it might be. My number 14 is By No Means. That's a good pun right there. But I really like this with all kinds of stuff. I don't think this would be broken at all, by the way. It's really mana intensive. You know, it takes a while to get off the ground, and then you got to spend a bunch of mana getting it going, you know. So I actually think this is kind of well costed for what it does, and it doesn't have to be in an unset, you know? And it works with all kinds of stuff that we have in Standard. Obviously, Planeswalkers get loyalty counters, that's cool. Treasure Map will get counters, you know, Oracle's Vault even. A bunch of cool stuff that we have. And then in other formats, there's like charge counters and such. Like this with Chalice of the Void would be pretty hilarious, I would say. So lots of tricks with this, and if all else fails, just make like a bunch of dwarves or a bunch of gnomes with like +1/+1 counters on other guys, or like put a bunch of +1/+1 counters on dudes. There's a lot that this card could do for you. But again, I think it's so mana intensive that it's not broken. I would love to see this in a real set. My number 13 is Masterful Ninja, and this is where things start getting a little crazy. Like, this is actually, when you really get down to it, an unbelievable free creature that's resilient to sorcery speed removal. You know, they essentially can't target it while it's in your hand, obviously. So, while it's their turn, they can play sweepers and stuff, but they're not going to take out your ninja, you know? It's free. It's a free creature. You'll never pay its casting cost, you know? I think this is really, really neat, you know? I more or less disregard the casting cost of this card. It's a free freaking creature, which again is probably a little broken, but I'd at least like to try it. Maybe we could always ban it if it's too much, right? That's a terrible way to look at things, but still, I'd at least like to try something like this in Standard. I think it's fun. Number 12 is Split Screen. Just looks so awesome for Commander, and even in some cases Standard. You know, imagine this with Vizier the Menagerie. That's pretty hilarious. But in Commander, you can set up some great stuff. Like, imagine you have a Courser of Krufix and a Fast Bond out. Laugh forever. You just play all your lands in your entire deck at that point, because you got 4 different decks to draw lands off of. So there's a lot of fun stuff that you could potentially do with Split Screen. I would just really, really like to get a crack at playing this in Commander. My number 11 is X, and this card is hilarious to me, although it is a little weird to read, because we're sort of programmed as Magic players to read X's a certain way when they appear in Magic text boxes. But the way this essentially works, and if it's on the battlefield on your side, you can pay a blue and a black and tap it, put it into your opponent's hand. At that point, they play with their hand revealed, and you can pay 5 mana to play cards out of their hand for free, which is pretty hilarious, you know. And they can't play X while it's in their hand. That's funny, too. They can discard it and stuff if they get the chance to, so there is that. And it's really, really easy to remove. So, like, if you play it on turn 2, and then you have to wait till next turn to play it, then you're giving them a really good chance to, like, shock it or fatal push it or whatever. So, I think the card is somewhat fair, but once it's in your opponent's hand, it's really, really, really annoying for them, I would imagine. So I don't think that this is quite where we want to be in Constructed. I think the card's just way too annoying and hard to deal with. But that being said, I think it is a really, really neat mechanic that I wanted to at least highlight here. I'm not sure this wouldn't be like busted and constructed and really dumb to play against and all that, but I do think again that it's a really, really neat way to design a Magic card, so I at least want to point it out. Number 10 is Extremely Slow Zombie and Three-Headed Goblin. And yeah, I'm a little bit partial to both of these because they were both my preview cards for Unstable, but I'm kind of still in love with them. You know, I think that these would be really, really neat abilities to have in a real constructed game of Magic because of the design space they allow you to play around in, you know? Like ESZ, you know, 2 mana, 3/3, but it's got Last Strike. That's pretty neat. And it's got a relevant creature type too. You know, you can see like a 3 mana 5/5 with Last Strike. That might be pretty cool, you know? And there's a bunch of stuff you can do with Triple Strike. You know, you can do like a 1 mana 1/2 or 1/3 Triple Strike. That might be okay. Or you could do like a 3 mana 1/1 Triple Strike with Lifelink. That would be pretty hilarious. Mostly because I think if Wizards is going to give us an ability from an unset, it might be one of these, especially Last Strike. It's obviously not a broken ability and allows you to do cool stuff when it comes to playing around with the casting cost of a creature, you know. So I'm a big fan of both of these cards, and I would love to see them at least try one of these abilities in Constructed. But number 9 is Everything Mtg, and like, I really can't afford to, I don't have the time to go over all the amazing things you could do with this in a game of Commander, you know, and I love that it's got Proliferate on it. I would love to see Proliferate in Standard again, especially right now, you know, just, that seems super hot, so that's cool. It allows you to put +1/+1 counters on stuff if you've got nothing else to do, and it allows you, again, to play around with charge counters and stuff, so just like, this thing literally does everything. It's named that for a reason. So this is another card that, like, a lot like a couple of the artifacts on this list, I would really love to play around with in Commander specifically. But number 8 is Kindly Cognition, and note the wording here. Something that refers to artifacts in its rules text. Now, that doesn't include reminder text. So as far as I understand it, things like Fabricate don't work because Fabricate, it mentions artifacts in the reminder text. So I'm just not sure. I don't think that works, but it does work with a ton of other stuff. And I won't even go into like Modern and Legacy and all the things it works with in those formats because there's a bunch. But just in Standard, there's like PNLR and Whirler Virtuoso, and this will even like decrease the cost of things like Thopter Arrest and Unlicensed Disintegration, for God's sake. Like, there's just so much cool stuff that this works with, even just in Standard, not to mention all the other formats. I just really, really like the wording here. That's very sly, Wizards, and I would love to see a card, again, worded a little bit more. Like, I'd like to see more ideas like this on real Magic cards. I think that's really, really neat. But number 7 is Very Cryptic Command. If you've seen the set, you knew that the card had to show up somewhere on the list. This isn't quite as good as the actual Cryptic Command, but it's still really, really neat, and there's nothing super weird necessarily about the card that would keep it from getting played and constructed. A lot of people have like, what's that tap ability all about? It's about basic lands. You tap down all their basics, and some of their non-basics, for that matter. A lot of non-basics are just one word. So that would be not bad. And note, by the way, that the card can only cost you 2 net mana. You know, that first thing allows it to essentially just cost you 2 mana net. So that's pretty cool when it comes to wheeling your hand, you know, or you can pay the whole 4 mana and wheel your hand and then get an instant or sorcery back from your graveyard, and then your card advantage is at net 0. So that's not bad either. There's just so many cool things this card could do. Super versatile, and I'd love to try this out in a real game of Magic, but we'll probably never get the chance, sadly. But if you're building cube or something, this would be a pretty decent uncard to go into a cube. All the way up here at number 6 is a card I don't have much to say about because it's sort of self-explanatory. Number 6 is Super Duper Deathray, and all I really have to say is, like, please put Trample onto like direct damage spells. That's awesome. That is a really, really cool idea, and I think that a lot of people who have tried to design their own Magic cards have come up with this idea in the past, but it's really neat to see Wizards actually doing it, and maybe they're doing it to gauge reaction to it. And as far as this guy goes, I really like the idea behind it, you know, and a card specifically exactly like this, I would love for you to print tomorrow, Wizards. So this just looks really, really neat to me. I would love spillover damage on burn spells. Please do that, yes. My number 5 is Anime Library. I love this idea so much. Like, you'll note that a lot of these cards that are on this list are still kind of weird because they're in unsets, you know, but they're all odd concepts that could almost maybe be actually printed, you know, maybe just a smidge off. but they're just slightly too weird for Wizards to actually have the courage to print, I would say. Like, they're not going to actually print something like this, but it's not insanely busted. You can always just kill it, you know. It's like, it's just in a control deck. This would be such an awesome finisher, you guys. I'm a huge fan of this card, and I want nothing more than to play this in Commander, especially where you just have this huge, you have like a 60-60 library. That would be pretty crazy. So I'm a huge fan of the design of this card. You know, I'm just all smiles even looking at it. So even though, by the way, I'm not really looking at it. Obviously, I'm just looking at my wall right now. But I'm imagining cards right there. You can see it. You guys can see it. But anyway, I'm a huge fan. Is all I can say over and over. I really like this card. Number 4 is Do-It-Yourself Serif. DIY Serif is probably also a little bit too broken to actually being constructed, but this is something else. Like, imagine this in EDH, you guys. Like, essentially a tutor, you know, allows you to play a bunch of weird, crazy artifacts that, by the way, you can combo together within her own text box. Like, it's just a crazy card that I would love to have the chance to play against other real cards in a game of EDH or something. Just like, this would maybe be slightly too busted, but I actually think it's on the cusp to where I think we could see a version of it. Not exactly this, but a version of it. You know, an attempt at it. Number 3 is Griselda Monster Basher. Just, this card is so great. It's another one that I'm just like all smiles about. I can't contain myself. I would love for this to be constructed legal, and I do not think that it's super broken either. I really don't. I just don't, you know. It's a reanimation spell that costs an awful lot of mana and requires you to have 2 decent creatures in your graveyard and stuff. I think that there's a lot of restrictions on the card that make it fair to play, make it balanced to play. We could actually see something like this. I would freaking love that, you know. I guess, and imagine again, EDH, this being your commander, what you could build around this. Like, hopefully your play group lets you play stuff like this in EDH. There are some play groups that will. Again, so long as the card from the unset isn't super busted. And I don't think this is. I want to build an EDH deck around this so super bad, and I don't even build that many EDH decks. Tells you how much I like this card. Really, the top 3 are just all cards like that I just like, really, please let me play these cards. So with that in mind, number 2 is Over My Dead Bodies, which might be like my favorite card that lets you mess with the graveyard that I've literally ever seen printed ever. And it's 6 mana. I don't think it's like super busted if it were constructed playable. You know, it kind of reminds me of like Living End and Living Death and stuff like that. You know, you could set it up pretty well, but you still have to resolve it and you have to get to it for that matter. So again, I don't think the card's super broken if it were a real card or anything. It'd just be a really fun deck to like, or card to build decks around and stuff. You could do some really evil stuff with this too if you built the deck around it. And if you could actually resolve it against control and stuff, it would just be decent in aggro. You know, if you can ensure that it resolves. Oh, you killed all my guys, you swept my board, whatever. You know, just play this and then swing with all my hasty graveyard guys. So just really like what they've done with this card. And again, at 6 mana, I think it's fairly priced. So I would love to play this in Constructed. It ain't never going to happen, but it would be awesome. It would be awesome. So if you've got a cube, this card's going in. This card would be awesome in a cube. Speaking of which, number 1 right here, Crowstorm. And this was not hard. This was not hard. It was like Over My Dead Bodies and Crowstorm at 1 and 2. Definitely no matter what. You know, just Crowstorm is so great to me. I love that it takes a time-honored Magic joke like Stormcrow and makes it into a really actually powerful card. I'm not sure that it's better than Empty the Warrens, but it is 1 mana better than Empty the Warrens. So there's that, and the creatures have evasion, which might be way better than Empty the Warrens. But Empty the Warrens get you way more power at the end of the day, so I'm not 100% sure, but what I do know is that I'd love to play Crowstorm in Standard. That would be sweet, like in the Aetherflux Reservoir deck that's essentially a Storm deck anyway. Something like this would be so crazy, and we have stuff like Opt and stuff in the format, you know, strategic planning, low-cost draw cards stuff that we could play along with this to just get like 5-6 crows in the late game. That would be pretty sweet. You know, we got favorable wins in the format to buff them all. Crowstorm looks so great, and I want to play it in Standard so bad. But, you know, that being said, Modern Storm, which is already a blue-red deck that plays Empty the Warrens, might want this instead. It all depends. If you play that deck in Modern, by the way, which some people do, it's a relatively popular deck, then let me know. Would you rather have this, or would you keep Empty? So that's my list. I'm tapped out for now. Let me know how you like that down there in the comments section, or if I missed anything that you'd really like to see on the list. That's important too. You know, you can like the video if you like it. Make sure you sub if you're new, because Rivals of Ixalan spoilers right around the corner. We're going to be covering every single one of those, and we've still got deck techs this season. So you want to see all that content if you've never seen me before. I'm okay at this, I think. So sub if you're new, you know, do all that stuff. Follow me on Twitter at SpMTGDev, or throw me $1 on Patreon at patreon.com/SpMTG, and you can see what decks we're doing the day before we do them. That's a pretty cool deal. And remember to click the first link in the description to go over to TCG Player. They help bring content to you. They're pretty cool like that. I like them. And you just click that link, you can go over and find unstable boxes for super low on pre-order right now. Like some of them 93. That's the lowest price I've found, which is really, really good compared to a lot of other online retailers. So if you're looking to get any unstable booster boxes, TCG Player is probably one of the best places you can go right now for prices as far as unstable goes. So give that a shot, and I think that's all I've got to say. I'm Dev from the place, you guys. Thanks for watching, my wizards.